Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt a weight you couldn't quite name? A dull, sinking feeling that whispers, "You're not enough. You should be ashamed." That quiet voice, that invisible pressure, it doesn't come from nowhere. It's the result of a lifetime of messages from society, religion, culture, and even family, telling you who you should be, what you should hide, and what makes you wrong. But what if shame isn't a sign that something is broken within you, but a sign that something false has been imposed upon you? This is where the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche shatters everything we think we know about identity, morality, and freedom. To Nietzsche, shame isn't just a painful feeling. It's a powerful social tool, crafted over centuries to control us. It makes us tame, obedient, and disconnected from our true instincts. Shame, he argues, is how the world kills your inner fire, before you ever get the chance to discover who you really are. But Nietzsche doesn't leave us in despair. Instead, he offers something revolutionary, a call to arms to reclaim your life. He invites you to strip away the values you've inherited, to break the chains of herd morality, and to undergo a personal rebirth. His challenge, to become the creator of your own identity, to turn shame into strength, to become, in his words, the Übermensch, the one who rises above the noise and dares to live with authenticity and power. In this video, we'll dive deep into Nietzsche's timeless insights and uncover how to confront shame head-on, how to reject the labels you've been forced to wear, and how to reclaim the most sacred thing you possess, your identity. If you've ever felt like you were meant for more, but didn't know where to start, this is where your journey begins. Understanding shame through a Nietzschean lens. Nietzsche interprets shame not merely as a psychological issue, but as a philosophical one rooted in morality and power. In the genealogy of morals, he identifies the origin of shame in the historical development of moral systems. According to Nietzsche, traditional morality, especially Christian morality, emerged out of resentment. The powerless and oppressed, unable to act out their strength, created a moral framework that glorified meekness, humility, and guilt. This inversion of values labeled natural human instincts, pride, ambition, desire, as sinful and shameful. As a result, individuals internalized this moral code and began to feel ashamed of their instincts and desires. The noble virtues of strength and self-assertion were demonized. Shame became the emotional mechanism by which individuals police themselves. Nietzsche writes about the development of the bad conscience, a self-torturing internal judge that condemns the natural drives of the human being. This shame, he argues, is artificial and socially constructed. It is not inherent to the human condition, but imposed by cultural and religious systems that prioritize conformity over individuality. Slave morality and the birth of shame. A central concept in Nietzsche's philosophy is the distinction between master morality and slave morality. Master morality arises from the affirmation of strength, vitality, and nobility. In contrast, slave morality emerges from the perspective of the weak and oppressed, who reframe their lack of power as moral superiority. Good, in slave morality, is associated with meekness and obedience, while evil is associated with strength and dominance. Slave morality gives rise to shame because it teaches individuals to suppress their instincts and natural inclinations. Rather than embracing life and its complexities, slave morality encourages denial, guilt, and repression. This process generates internal conflict, A person is torn between their natural drives and the imposed values of society. Shame becomes the result of this conflict, a signal that one is deviating from the norms of a moral system designed to inhibit the individual's true nature. Nietzsche's critique is not just about morality, but about the psychological consequences of living under a value system that teaches people to be ashamed of their power. He sees shame as a tool of social control, a way to keep individuals docile and dependent. To overcome shame, one must recognize its origins in slave morality and begin the difficult process of questioning the values one has inherited. The will to power and identity formation. Nietzsche's solution to shame lies in his concept of the will to power, a fundamental drive not merely to survive but to expand, grow, and assert one's own values. According to Nietzsche, human beings are not static entities with fixed identities. They are dynamic processes capable of self-overcoming and self-creation. Reclaiming one's identity, then, involves embracing the will to power. This means recognizing that identity is not given but created through conscious effort. The individual must become an artist of the self, sculpting their values, beliefs, and behaviors in accordance with their own will, rather than the expectations of others. This act of self-creation requires courage, as it often involves defying social norms and confronting internalized shame. Nietzsche's ideal figure, the Übermensch or Overman, is the embodiment of this process. The Übermensch transcends conventional morality, reclaims his instincts, and lives according to values he has created for himself. He is not burdened by shame because he does not accept the moral framework that engenders it. He is beyond good and evil in the traditional sense. He has moved beyond the dichotomy that makes shame possible. Eternal recurrence and the affirmation of life. Another key concept in Nietzsche's thought that aids in overcoming shame is the idea eternal recurrence. Nietzsche asks us to imagine living our life over and over again, in exactly the same way for eternity. If one recoils from this idea, it is a sign that they are not living authentically. If one can embrace it joyfully, then they have affirmed their life in its entirety. Eternal recurrence challenges us to live without regret or shame. It demands that we take full responsibility for our choices and live in such a way that we would be willing to repeat our lives endlessly. This thought experiment forces individuals to evaluate whether they are living according to their own values or those imposed upon them. In the face of shame, the doctrine of eternal recurrence becomes a liberating force. If one can affirm even their moments of shame and transform them into sources of strength and insight, then shame loses its paralyzing grip. The individual moves from passive suffering to active affirmation, from being a victim of their past to becoming the creator of their future. Reclaiming identity through self-overcoming. Nietzsche sees self-overcoming as the path to authentic identity. Self-overcoming is not about rejecting oneself, but about transcending one's limitations and continually evolving. It is a process of turning obstacles such as shame into catalysts for growth. This requires honesty and introspection. Nietzsche emphasizes the importance of knowing oneself deeply, including one's drives, weaknesses, and hidden desires. Only by confronting the full truth of who we are can we begin to overcome shame. The journey towards self-creation is not linear or easy. It demands that we confront pain, contradiction, and the discomfort of transformation. Yet Nietzsche insists that this struggle is necessary. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, he writes, You must be willing to burn yourself in your own flame. How could you rise anew if you have not first become ashes? Overcoming shame and reclaiming identity means undergoing this metaphorical burning. It is an act of purification and rebirth, a shedding of borrowed values and false identities. Conclusion: shame, for Nietzsche, is a byproduct of moral systems designed to suppress individuality and enforce conformity. It is not an inherent part of the human condition, but a symptom of cultural and psychological repression. To overcome shame, one must reject the values that create it, and embark on a path of self-affirmation and self-creation. Nietzsche offers a radical and empowering vision of identity, one that is not discovered but forged. Through the will to power, the practice of eternal recurrence, and the courage to become one's own creator, individuals can reclaim their identities and live without shame. In Nietzsche's philosophy, liberation is not found in external approval, but in the inner strength to affirm one's existence in all its complexity. In an age where shame is amplified by social comparison and cultural conformity, Nietzsche's insights remain deeply relevant. His call to reject inherited values and live authentically challenges us to confront our own shame and rise beyond it, not by denying who we are, but by daring to become who we might yet be.